So Chavot Yair, 17th century in Prague, and he was in a moment of transformation historically. He was in a moment of transformation because of many reasons, and one of them was changes in the general society as well, not only the Jewish society but the general society as well. And he has some interesting takes. Sometimes he argued with the Rabbi Moshe Isserlich, who was in the 16th century in Poland. And the Chavot Yair, we know, for example, I just gave a class in Shul a few Shabbatot ago, talking about the fact of how did he deal with different minhagim. Every community has different minhagim, and he was worried that minhagei Polin are not authentic, and minhagei Ashkenaz from Germany are much more authentic. Obviously, there are different. The Yekes are Yekes, right? So it was something that the Chavot Yair pushed, and even against the Rama. Also, don't forget, it was also the time of Shabtai Tzvi, that obviously affected Jewish history, but definitely halacha, and the way you look at Kabbalah and the way you look at the different minhagim that just come without any reasons behind. So Chavot Yair was in a very interesting and important historical junction for the Jewish people. So he says the following: Tamtzit dvarai, the essence of what I said, it was a long tshuva, כי אם היה בזה איזה חשש חלילה דלא יישמע על פיך ונודה לו שהוא שם עבודה זרה ושאסור להזכיר שמה, עליו היה ראוי להתלונן שהוא נכתב בשמה העצם. ואני כתבתי וזכרתי שם המשובש ומוטעה בפיהם, ואין בפיהם שמה האמיתי כלל. So what does that mean? And what is he really talking about? He basically wants to say that mentioning the name of their God, or God, is not saying Shem shel Avodah Zarah. So even to say Yeshu or Jesus, it's not to say Shem shel Avodah Zarah. And why not? The Chavot Yair says, because basically, even when they say Jesus, they really mean to say what? God. And God is the universal God. Is our God as well. They are wrong in trying to attribute some godly attributes to Jesus. But really, if you ask an average Christian, they think it's the same. And not because they think that just that their God is like almost like our God in terms of what? In terms of belief. And obviously the Chavot Yair is based on what? On what Rabbi Yochanan says in the Gemara, that what? That minhag avotehem beyedehem. Which means they just do it as part of a ritual, but they don't really know what's going on. Bemet, look, we know, and I think I mentioned it once, that I know from the Middle Ages. I mean, the Middle Ages, not that I lived there, but from my studies, is basically that peasants, they didn't know a thing. They went to church. The priest told them that how terrible they are, so they need to what? To pay their way or something like that, or to do a little confession. And then that's it, they moved on. They didn't know too much about the theology of their religion. They know that who do they need to hate, who killed their Mashiach, and move on. So it was not that difficult. And by the way, even among Jews, lehavdil, even though most Jews knew how to read and write, many Jews didn't know too much of the complications and the complexity of halacha. Definitely not in Sfarad. In Ashkenaz, maybe they were a little bit more involved. In Sfarad, we see it from derech hapsika, from the way that the psak is. You have a chief rabbi in Artzot Sfarad. He writes the tshuvot, very short, very concise, not too many reasons, and move on. When you see tshuvot Ashkenaziyot, it's a little different. So basically, the Chavot Yair says in the 17th century, even if they say the name of their God, or even if they take a shvu'ah in the name of their God, which according to the Gemara it was asur, it was prohibited, so it's mutar, it's not avodah zarah. And he continues on, and he says, ואף כי המון עם המחזיקים לעוון וחירוף הזכרת שם הנאבד כמו שקוראים עובדיו, וכן שם אמו, who is his mother?
Mother and father.
No, Mary, okay. ראוי להניחם על מנהגם, מכל מקום לפי האמת אין איסור כלל. כמו שבחיי גבנה נזהרים מלהזכיר מטבע פלונית בלשונם, מכל מקום אין בו איסור וגמגום אפילו בפה וכל שכן בכתב. So basically he was criticized. He wrote Jesus in one of his tshuvot about Jesus, and he was criticized by probably someone that thought that knows more than him. And he says to him, how can you write the name? It's a Shem Avodah Zarah. He says, it's not Shem Avodah Zarah anymore. And we are in the 17th century, and we are doing business with them. And they mentioned their name of God, like what we mentioned, Havdil, Alfei Avdalot, but we mentioned the name of God. No one here is trying to say what? Shemot Shel Avodah Zarah. Now, we mentioned already, if you remember, that Rabbeinu Tam in the 12th century in France also dealt with that issue, and he came up with the idea that what? That he says the same thing, that it's not considered as what? As what? As Shem Avodah Zarah, that's one. And B, he said it's maybe kematzil miyado, which means if he knows that you cannot accept him taking a shvuah, he would lie to you, he will deceive you, he will steal from you, knowing that what? That there is no way in the world that you can get your money back. So therefore, part of it was survival, just Jewish survival, financial survival, and the other one was, okay, let's empty the meaning of Avodah Zarah from mentioning their names, and from now on, even when they say Jesus, this is not any Avodah Zarah, it's basically they mean to speak about God.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
We do not say, when we talk about Hashem, we don't say Ado. We never say that besides when we're davening. So like, you understand my question? We don't say Hashem's name, only when we're davening.
That's true, but the only thing is that many people say, if you are religious, you will say Elokim Adirim.
Right.
But some people who don't know to say Elokim Adirim, they will say with a hey, okay? Or when you talk to people who are traditionals, and Ani nishba lecha be, okay, you went to the marketplace, you know how they talk, and it's not, again, it's only in terms of koach, power, and also obviously does not have any avodah zarah in it. So before we see Dr. Harbertol article, which is really interesting, he talks a lot about the Meiri that we mentioned before. You remember the Meiri, the end of the 13th century in Parpignan, that he was the one to create this category of what? Gdurim bedarkei adat, which means they are restricted with the laws of religion, which means all the perception, the negative perception that we had on them, which included, for example, not to allow them to babysit our kids, not to give them an animal, not to do partnership with them, not to do business with them, that's all gone according to the Meiri. Okay. By the way, just as a real side note, maybe as a teaser, Be'ezrat Hashem, what is that, November 12th, around December 15 or משהו כזה, my shiurim, I'll give probably 2 or 3 classes, we'll see, about Nittelnacht. The Nittelnacht, okay? The sources for not learning Torah or not to be with your wife. The mikveh was closed, and gifts on that night were a little bit of a problem. So I'll share with whoever can come. That will be Shabbat, not here, unless none of you will be there, so I can give it to you too. But basically, it's really interesting to see how things came about, and also when it started. Probably the first one who started really writing on it, even though it was censorized later on, was, and I'm not going to give you now the shoe, obviously, so Trumat Adeshen, OUisrael Iserlein in the 15th century, who was the posek of the Ashkenazic Jewry. And he was asked a very interesting question: can someone give a gift to his non-Jewish partner on that Nittelnacht, which is the 8th day after the celebration, which is New Year's? And what's the date?
January 1st.
Be careful.
December 31st.
Be careful. Be careful.
Okay.
What do I mean? You don't need to be careful. But there is a difference between the Catholics and the Russian Greek. For them is the 6th of January. Now, anyone here knows why?
Yes, three König.
Is that the feast of Epiphany?
Three kids. On January 6th.
Okay, there are different calendars, and they added 10 days. Okay, the Russian Catholic, they kept, at least according to their claim, they kept the calendar correct, and they didn't add 10 days, and therefore their New Year is January 6th. And the Catholics, it's you need to come for Shabbat, Bezrat Hashem. And the Catholics for them is January 1st. The question is, do you keep Yom Tov Sheni Shel Galuyot, right? Or not? Do you keep January 1st and January 6th, or you keep only one of them? So this is a very interesting question. But you see that Jews already in the 15th century asked the Trumat Hadeshen about that, and it's obviously why, because they expected it. They expected it. Now, why is that allowed or not allowed? Okay, so that's a different question. Okay.
Which country did Truman Hadeshen live in?
Mama
Which country did Truman Hadeshen live in?
was in, if I'm not mistaken, it was in Poland.
Poland.
Yeah.
And
Rabbi Israel Iserlan.
we keep the Julian calendar with regard to the St. Calamato.
Nachon meod. So there is an effect about, because you will see in the Sidurim that you used to daven with in Chutz La'aretz. Now I'm sure you daven with Koren, so it's a little different. But it says, Bnei Chutz La'aretz, they recite Geshem when? December 4th or December 5th? What does that mean? Like you do Yom Kippur Beyud Tishrei or Yud Aleph Tishrei based on your convenience. What does that mean? So it depends on how you calculate this calendar. And Shishim Yom Betkufa, what the Gemara says. So not for now. I know you look like maybe you want an answer, but you're not going to get it from me today. So let's go.
You never do.
Okay, Dr. Halbertal. So he has an interesting article. The what?
Your shears on Shabbos the 14th?
I don't know yet. I need to see. I'm starting a new series this Shabbat about something that not in our shul, just about talking in shul. The source for that minhag and how rabbis try to prevent it. So that's what I'm going to do this Shabbat for like 3 weeks, I think, and then yeah.
Then you can go.
No. What I do is a series of classes every Shabbat. Okay, I'm not advertising the shul. Now let's go back to our shul. Okay.
Good luck.
Religious tolerance in the Meiri's teaching has been the subject of scholarly examination. But the nexus between his halachic position and his general worldview and its sources has never been adequately clarified. Meaning everyone understood that the Meiri is making a chidush here. If until the Meiri, Rabbeinu Tam and Ri and many others, but especially Rabbeinu Tam, they dealt with the issues, but how did they solve the issues? Locally. Which means, yes, you can do a shvua. Why? Because if not, you're going to lose your money. You are allowed to be partner with them. Why? Because they really don't mean, when they say Jesus, they don't really mean to say that that's God. But they didn't change the perception on Christians. The Meiri said that a big chunk of all those prohibitions that were based on perception of paganism, that's gone. That's what he says, Gdurim bedarkei adat. So even, I remember I told you last week, that even if a Jewish woman is in prison, in jail, by the king, the prince, or whatever, our assumption that she was not touched. Why? That's the law. There is a law. And by the way, that's obviously a change in the 13th century, that even kings, I mean, again, it was not, obviously, for bribe, you can get your judgment, and judgment was not fair for all, but there was a law of the state, or the law of the country. So then he says, so his mission is to try to what? Not only to talk about what the Meiri said, but also to try to what? To connect or to link the Meiri's halachic ruling to his worldview. So then he says the following. Scholarly consideration began with a detailed analysis by Jacob Katz, who viewed the Meiri's as adopting a unique, comprehensive position based on a fundamental theological concept. The Meiri's predecessors had proposed various solutions to bridge the gulf between widespread medieval Ashkenazi practice and the halachic limitations on contact with Gentiles. However, none of them took a position that distinguished fundamentally between idolatry and Christianity. If such a distinction appeared at all in halachic literature, it was limited in its use to particular times and places, and it provided no basis for a definitive and generalized permissive ruling. The Meiri's was the first to draw this fundamental distinction, and the permissive ruling he proposed was accordingly definitive and independent. It followed neither post facto from the community's practice, nor did it depend on other permissive rulings. Finally, it extended beyond the permissive ruling issued by the halachic authorities who preceded him. Now, so Yaakov Katz, I don't know if I highly recommend to read many of his articles. He's very smart. So,
Where is he from, Yaakov Katz?
I know from the universities here and reading, but I don't know. But I'm not sure if he was born and raised here. I don't know. So basically, he says that the distinction that you can see the Meiri is by the way. Okay, I need to give it a little introduction. The introduction is that in halacha, when you deal with a halachic question, okay, so you can deal with the halachic question legufo shel inyan, which means to try to deal with the issue at hand, or you can look at that issue as what? As a principle in something much larger. And then to address that little question, you might need to what? To change the entire thing. So for example, you know what? I'll give you an example. Okay, I'll give you an example. During COVID, okay, one of the questions that most rabbis were asked was, Rabbi, can I fulfill my obligation of a minyan through Zoom? Okay? Now, I can deal with the question through what lenses? Lenses. I can deal with the question by saying, look, there is a plague, there is a magifa, and I need to look at sources of magifot in the past and to see what was the ruling, and then to try to understand, okay, what can I say specifically in this case of the magifa? Okay, so if I can find that the Noda Yehuda and the Khatam Sofer said that obviously there was no Zoom, but that I can daven in my room see through the window a minyan and I can hear them, so that will be considered, yes, so I can derive my conclusion to Zoom during COVID. So, all right, and they can, let's say that they can, whatever, I'm talking about the methods, not about the halacha. So the first method is just to look at it and to say, okay, plague, magefa, that's what I do. Or I can look at this question as what? Is Zoom nothing to do with what? With magefa, is considered as what? As me being there. Obviously it derives from legufo shel inyan, from the issue at hand, but then if my answer is yes, I'm not saying that is yes, it was no, but if the answer is yes, then it has nothing to do with the magefa. It can be what? Rabbi, I need to be on an airplane, okay, and I need to say Kaddish, and I just need to be on that flight, and I know there is a minyan at that time, and even same time zone, so I'm not going to make it complicated, okay? Can I say Kaddish on Zoom? Okay, so there's nothing to do with the magifa. You understand the difference? I can say I'm using an external source of leniency. At time of magifa, obviously we need to be more lenient. But if I determine that Zoom is mutar not only because it's magifa, but rather because it's what? Let's say I determine that Zoom is what? Is like me mamash being there. So then I don't need a magifa. So there are two different ways to do it. So Rabbeinu Tam, in this analogy, basically chose what? To look at that only as a magifa, which means there is an external leniency, financial stability, maybe they don't really mean that that's God, but if that will change, zehu. According to the Meiri, he says, no, I'm changing the entire background here, the surrounding. This is not the same people, which means everything that the Talmud talks about in Masechet Avodah Zarah from Bet Amud Aleph to Vav and a little bit later, basically does not apply anymore. Never existed on the people that we are talking about today. So that's a major difference. Now, Ephraim Orbach, everyone knows Professor Orbach, took issue with Jacob Katz's position, contending that the Meiri's distinction between idolatrous religions and Christianity could already be found in the writings of his predecessors. In his view, the Meir is merely coined a new term for non-idolatrous religions, nations restricted by the ways of religion, umot hagdurot bedarkei hadatot. So it's not so much about the content, but rather about the what? The definition. Similarly, contended Auerbach, the Meiri permitted nothing more than his predecessors, and that was the true measure of his ruling. Inasmuch as no halachic consequences flowed from the Meiri's new formula, no substantive change can be said to have taken place by reason of his position on religious tolerance. Responding to Auerbach's critics, Jacob Katz and Gerald Bildstein showed that the Meiri's unique formula indeed extended the permissive rulings range beyond of that of his predecessor's ruling, and its wider scope was not confined to the practical and apologetic needs of the community. Okay? So Auerbach basically claimed that Katz, you didn't do any chidush here. You basically, I'm looking at the bottom line. How many things are now allowed for me to do with Gentiles before you and after you? And the answer is, it's the same. So you didn't do any chidushim, you just coined it in a nicer way. Okay. My purpose, not mine, Halbertal's purpose, my purpose is to analyze all of them. Okay. That's going to be your purpose as well. My purpose is to present sources not yet analyzed in the literature and that support Jacob Katz's position, which means the Meiri has a unique and distinct way to solve these issues. Most of the study will be devoted to clarifying the term nation restricted by the ways of religion in the broad and systematic context of the Meiri's position, and to explicating the Meiri's concept of historical progress, which distinguishes between ancient nations of those of his time. Okay. So now he's saying so everyone understand what he's trying to do, right? He's trying to support J. Katz's position that the Meiri is unique and a new phenomena, especially when you compare him to his predecessors, and also that he is not dealing with those issues legufo, but rather change the entire concept. Okay. Position can be analyzed delineating three categories that touch on the halachic relationship to Gentiles. The first category encompasses prohibitions on commerce with Gentiles that flow from the concern that such commercial contacts promote and indirectly facilitate idolatrous ritual or cause Jews to benefit from idolatrous ritual or its apparatus. Thank you. The prohibition on the trading with a Gentile on his festival day, lest he proceed to thank his gods for profit gain through the transaction, provided a paradigm for prohibitions designed to distance Jews from any, even indirect contact with idolatrous ritual. With respect to the Gentiles of his day, the Meiris relaxed the prohibition on trading with Gentile on his festival day, the prohibition on trading with the Gentile when a portion of the profit is taxed for ritual necessities, the prohibition on selling ritual necessities such as incense or frankincense to a Gentile, the prohibition on letting a house to a Gentile,
Renting.
letting a house to a Gentile,
Letting is renting.
lest he bring into adulterous worship, the prohibition on deriving benefit from ordinary Gentile wine, stam yainam, which was decreed out of concern about wine that had definitely, where is it? I can't see anything. Okay. Had definitely been meant for libations, like a vaday yainam, and the prohibitions of expensively greeting a Gentile and entering a Gentile's house to greet him on his festival. The Meiris permitted these 6 activities in his day and applied the prohibitions only to the ancient idolatrous nations. So 6 of those things are mutarim according to the Meiri. Okay. The second area.
So wine, are you allowed to just drink any wine?
No, not to drink wine.
Getting thirsty?
Oh.
And you can.
The second area to be considered in halacha's attitude toward the Gentiles' rights and obligations. This category focuses on the legal and personal standing of the Gentile, not on indirect contact with ritual. A prime example is the Gentile's liability to fully compensate a Jew for damage caused by his animal to a Jew's property, in contrast to the Jew's exemption from any corresponding liability to the Gentile when the Jew's animal caused damage. Yeah,
Not nice. That doesn't
because it says in the Torah, "Chi igach shor ish et shor re'eu." Re'eu, and not the Gentile. Yeah.
But that doesn't go dark.
You don't want them to know that.
It is recorded, so what I can't do anything about it.
That wouldn't be dark saying we have
Do you
dark
think you were friends
shalom.
before?
That's
Oh, so the question is, do we have Darkei Shalom? So now we are not talking about Darkei Shalom, just Ikov Adin et Ha'ar, and according to the Din of Choshen Mishpat, באמת it's like that, a Jewish ox, okay, who caused the damage to a Gentile does not need to pay, a non-Jewish ox, obviously an ox that belongs to a non-Jew, who damaged a Jew, he needs to pay full damages, and there is no distinction between what? Tam ve'mu'ad. Yes?
but aren't there like national laws which would super?
We're talking about Dina de Malchut Dina. Yeah, here we are just talking about from the Jewish perspective. Yes. The Meiri? Great question. The question is how his contemporaries view the Meiri. So the question is, who are they? That's the first question. Second question is, the Meiri was discovered only around 100 and plus years ago. His manuscript was gone. We didn't even know he existed. So there was a guy who thought that he's buying a manuscript that belonged to someone else, I forgot who. And then he goes to this attic or whatever it is, and he finds all these manuscripts, and he looks at that, and he looks at that, and says, this is not the guy I was looking for, but I did find a treasure here. And he found the Meiri, Rabbi Menachem Meiri, and this Rabbi Menachem Meiri wrote Perushim on almost the entire Talmud, on Masechet Avot, and some other Perushim. The nice part is that first he's from southern France, what we'll call today Provence, but then it was Perpignan. B, he accumulated a lot of the Rishonim that were before him. So we have knowledge now about more people. And the third one, that he was somewhat influenced by the Rambam, which gives us another hint to the influence of the Rambam on southern France in around the late 13th century. But it created a huge problem. Why? Because, for example, the Bet Yosef, Rabbi Yosef Karo, who lived in the 16th century, who composed the Shulchan Aruch, he did not know about the Meiri. So the question is, and this is always when we find more manuscripts, is what do we do now? If we find something, let's say, in this Meiri that contradicts the halacha that we agreed upon from the 16th century and move and forward, what do you do with them? Would you say, look, if he would know that what the Meiri said, he will change his mind? Or you say, whatever information he had in front of him, that's what you have, v'zehu. So this is a big question in halacha. What do you do with them? So in terms of contemporaries, I think there was one in Italy, Rabbi Shai Tarani, which was also in the late 13th century, but I don't know even if they knew each other. There were some Chachmei Provence, but none of them, I think, as famous as the Meiri now, and probably some of them just lost their manuscripts and lost their knowledge. Okay, נחזור לענייננו. So, the Meiris treated the Gentiles of his day no differently from Jews with respect to obligations and rights in the following matters. Nekudotayim. Compensation for property damage, the prohibition on robbery, the obligation to return lost property, the obligation to rescue from harm, granting... Yeah, no, something came up on my screen. Thank you. And I was saved by not being able to say this word. And the obligation to help in loading a beast of burden. the prohibition on excessive profit, the imposition of equal punishment for killing a Gentile, the prohibition on delaying payment to a hired worker, the violation of the Shabbat to save a human life, the authorization to sell armaments to a Gentile, and the authorization to stable an animal in the Gentile's inn. According to the Meiri, the discrimination that pervades the halacha with respect to these rights applies only to the ancient nations, which are not restricted by their religious practices. In the Meiri's view, contemporary Gentiles are fully equal to Jews in these respects. This is lo pachot velo yoter revolution. Think about it. According to the Talmud, which, by the way, that was also one of the reasons. Okay, you know what? Little history. We need a little history, because without it, it will be very hard and difficult to understand it. What we are saying now, it's like nu bemet. You want to tell me the Jews thought like that? And the answer is, not only that we thought like that, we codified it in halacha. If you find an aveda that belonged to a non-Jew, you don't need to return it back. If you want to be a tzaddik, זה משהו אחר, but you don't need to. Your ox damage a non-Jew property, you are exempt. He damaged you, full price. If you see a non-Jew in danger and it's Shabbat, you tell him Shabbat Shalom and you move on. Okay? You see him in a pit. You see him in a no.
Doesn't matter.
Klum. So the question is, so basically, it makes discrimination, mamash discrimination. Now, don't forget, you didn't hear their laws, right? We know only our side.
Yeah, the priests.
You have the other side. The other side didn't really care so much about Jewish life, okay? And many times they were calling to kill us. And their perception on us was also not that flattering, okay? So we are talking about two societies that has tremendous animosity, a lot of, what do you call it? דעות קדומות, preconceived ideas or notions. And each one of us look at each other and we think we see the devil, okay? So those things definitely happened. But the Meiri in the 14th century, or late 13th, basically says from now on, so it's not only the Avodah Zarah issue, it's about how do I view a Gentile. And I view him, he's like a Jew. Now, does not mean I can marry him. But in terms of damages, on all what we will call cultural and societal obligations, we are the same. Why? Because they are gdurim bedarkei hadat. They are restricted in the practices of religion. Now, what does that mean also? It meant that what? That when the rabbi said whatever they said, that you don't need to give him the lost object, and they basically, not God forbid that they were like subhuman, but the idea is that their religion, paganism, did not make them what? Better people or people who abide the law. Moral people, ethical people. The thing is that after they accepted upon themselves to what? To restrict themselves with their religion and to be moral and to be ethical and to have some kind of a judicial system, therefore they become what? Equal in rights to Jews, and there is really no discrimination. By the way, part of the idea, and here in Israel obviously it's very different, but in Chutz La'aretz, that the doctor, drive on Shabbat to the hospital, and most of his patients are what? Are not Jews. How can he do that? You are Mechalel Shabbat for a Jew. Since when for a non-Jew? Part of the issue, I'm not saying all of it, but the Meiri is one of the ones that we rely on to say, it's not, and look, this is not, and this needs to be very clear. Many rabbis will tell you today, a Jewish physician can do it. Why? Because of what? Eva. If he will not do it, a non-Jewish doctor will not do it, and would create a chaos in society. We cannot tolerate that, something like that. The Meiri does not mention Eva. He does not mention an external source. He is talking internally, something changed.
What about that everybody's created in the image of God?
That's wonderful, but you can lose it.
No, but I'm saying like a human being, like to save somebody, to save a person who's sick, a Jew or non-Jew. So you're saying the reasons that he's giving, but isn't there also like because he's created in the image of God or something like that? We all are.
Oh yeah, sure. But what does it
That-
mean?
I don't know.
Right.
I
So
don't
in
know.
the eyes of Chazal, pre-Meiri and pre-Meiri,
Yeah.
they said yeah, they have Tzelem Elokim, but they might say that paganism basically destroyed the Tzelem, took away the Tzelem Elokim, because yes, you can destroy the Tzelem Elokim that was given to you.
You can.
Yes.
So what about the idea of giving your organs? Because I read that a Chayal who passed away donated 6 of his organs to 6 different people. So we take organs when we need them, but we're not allowed to give our organs.
So I will totally disagree with the not allowed. This is not the subject of the class, so I'm not going to elaborate on it. But in today's world, organ donations became even halachically much more accepted, and also monitored. So it depends. Here in Israel, there is definitely less issues and complications than giving it in Chutz La'aretz. Okay, so going back to our issue, the Meiri is totally changing all the halachot that basically viewed non-Jews as pagans who are not restricted in the laws of religion, and therefore they do not deserve to be treated like any other Jews. Answer now, no, that's gone. They are going to be exactly like you.
They were supposed to, they got already the 7 mitzvah for Noah. That's their religion. That's their framework.
All right, and they lost it. Meaning they lost it.
They never developed
They-
it the right way.
All right, nachon, and that's I think part of what he says, the Meiri, in his mind, gdurim bedarkei hadat, not our religion. They don't become Jews. They need to what? Keep the Sheva Mitzvot Bnei Noach. And what are the Sheva Mitzvot Bnei Noach? Think about it. Those are the fundamentals of our 613. Believing in one God, judgment, no idolatry, no adultery, okay, no avodah zarah, no ever min achai, no stealing, to have judges in the cities. Just have an ethical, moral society.
Christianity might have taken the place of that by throwing out the other part of it that makes it.
Especially in the
And
beginning.
Otherwise, they're going to just be into Judaism. In other words, they see their God. They see them as God. They see Jesus as God. Okay.
לא הבנתי. מההתחלה, נפתלי.
No, there's a Trinity. They don't see him as God.
Okay, but they don't get
Father, the Son, and the Holy
they
Ghost.
took out many of the mitzvot. They have to keep Shabbat like we keep it.
Oh no, they can keep Shabbat. The thing is that I thought you said something else.
I'm just going to say 30 seconds. Historically, there was the possibility that B'nai Noach would have been the universal religion that was actually based on the same makor that Judaism was based on. But when they did it, they threw out a lot of the things of Judaism.
Sure.
That otherwise that's the dilemma. But we should give them today more possibility to know they're B'nai Noach, and we continue to be Jews. Otherwise, what we're going to keep.
Oh no, we don't. We want to encourage them to keep Sheva Mitzvot Bnei Noach for sure. That in the 14th century, what the Meiri says, I'm not sure that all the non-Jews kept Sheva Mitzvot Bnei Noach. They were devoted Christians.
That wasn't developed. That's what I'm going to say.
No, what I'm saying is that the Meiri says that even though they still don't keep all Sheva Mitzvot Bnei Noach, but because they raised their level to at least keep some of it, which is their God, they believe basically in our God.
Jesus
And
is God. That's what you have to say, but straight. They see him not as a prophet. They see him as God.
not all of them. That's what the rabbi says, not me. That's what it was said in the 14th century, that they don't really, even when they say Jesus, they don't believe that he is God. They really mean to say the God of the universe. So that's what they said. Okay. Yes.
Why hasn't the stringency on wine and turning on the fire
Okay, very good.
changed? And secondly, why all the restrictions on who can supervise the wine and why non-Jews can't serve it?
Okay, so the question is very clear now. If you tell me that they are being treated like Jews in terms of damages and everything, so treat them like Jews with opening a wine, not marrying them.
Right.
So that's exactly the third category. So the third category encompasses measures to distance Jews from Gentiles, tied to the ban of intermarriage. An example is the prohibition on drinking ordinary Gentile wine. In this area, the Me'iris left all the prohibitions in place, applying them to the Gentiles of his day as well. Why? I know it sounds very arrogant, but I think it sounds very natural. Every group like to keep their group distinct and different than the others. And basically, there is also an understanding they might be wonderful people. They might be, maybe even better than some Jews that we know. However, we are Jews and they are not, and that's fine. This is where we are unlike any other religions. We don't try to convince them to be Jews. We try to convince them to be ethical and moral, and the only way to guarantee it is by them keeping Sheva Mitzvot Bnei Noach. Even in the time of Mashiach, not everyone will be a Jew. That will be a nightmare, right? So we don't want it. We don't need it. We want the world to be a full Enoshut humanity, which is comprised by different people. You have the Jews that will be recognized as the nation of God, and the others can definitely be inspired and continue to be part of this leading group of bringing humanity back to Gan Eden. There's no problem with it. So basically, the Meiri says, I cannot allow intermarriage. And why is that? Because this is still prohibited. And why is that still prohibited? Because you are a Jew and you are not. You want to become a Jew? Okay, there is a way to do it. There is conversion. But I cannot, even though I'm going to treat them in Choshen Mishpat, meaning the judicial approach towards them is they are equal to me, but they are not. We are not equal in terms of, we'll call it the spiritual neshamot. We are only in terms of the Choshen Mishpat, not the Even HaEzer, and not the Orach Chaim, and not the Yoreh De'ah. They can still eat pork, and they can still eat basar v'gvina, and it does not take away from their Sheva Mitzvot Bnei Noach. Why? Because they were never commanded not to do it. So they have no problems to eat on Yom Kippur, that falls on Shabbat, and to eat chazir. And they can still keep their morality and ethics. If a Jew eat on Yom Kippur, shechal b'Shabbat, a pork, okay? So it's not about his ethical behavior, but it's about his religious behavior. Okay. So these three categories are not necessarily tied to one another. A fundamental question arises concerning the linkage between the two areas, i.e., ritual-related prohibitions on contact and the delineation of judicial obligation and rights. Does the discrimination that dominates Talmudic halacha with respect to the rights of Gentile flow from their being idolatrous, implying that a different rule governs Gentiles who observe the seven Mitzvot Noach commandments, and that where a group of Gentiles found that does not practice idolatry, its status in both areas would change simultaneously. An alternative is that the denial of Gentile rights follows directly from the fact that they are Gentiles rather than idolaters. If the latter, the inapplicability of the first area of concern to a group of non-idolaters, Gentiles, has no effect whatsoever on the second area. In other words, is the discrimination between monotheists and pagans, or between Jews and Gentiles? This is a well-defined question. When I look at the Talmud, and we are going to be intellectually honest here, okay? In the time of the Talmud, there is a discrimination between Jews and non-Jews. By the way, according to history, there was always discrimination between Jews and non-Jews, but not necessarily from what? From our end, okay? So that was known. That's A. B. His question, and this is a really interesting analysis, is the discrimination based on idolaters versus gdurim bedarkei adat. So when you stop being an idolater, you move immediately to what? To no discrimination. Or that there is an inherent discrimination between Jews and Gentiles. And I don't care, you are an idolater, you are not an idolater, you keep Sheva Mitzvot Bnei Noach, you keep 10 Mitzvot Bnei Noach. I don't really care. you were born a Gentile, malasot, but there is a discrimination. That's the main question. So, come on.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
I know you're allowed, I believe that you're allowed to go into a mosque, but not into a church. Because a mosque, they say they have one God, and that the church, they practice avodah zarah. So you're saying they don't practice avodah zarah, but one of the reasons given is that if you go into a church, it is avodah zarah.
So some people say it's avodah zarah and you shouldn't go, especially when there is a mass or like there is prayer or whatever it is.
Okay, let's
And
take
some
one-
people say that it's just like a museum.
Okay, so that's what I meant.
Yeah.
If you look at it as a museum.
So some people say it's okay to go there while there is no service. Yeah.
Okay.
The question. No, go ahead, please.
Well, wouldn't that same thing apply to a mosque? It's okay to go there while there's no service?
In a mosque?
Mosque.
Yeah, so it's easier because there are no images. There are no images. The only thing is to get out of the mosque.
In the mosque, they believe in Allah, but in the Christian and Catholicism, at least, they believe in the Trinity.
Well, so
That's the other.
it's also it depends what kind of church, if the church is a real museum or it's not. So you have different rabbis giving different answers, as you know. The question focuses on whether the line in Halacha distinguishing Jew from Gentile rests upon the premise of an ontological gap between Jews and Gentiles or upon the difference between the monotheist way of life and the idolatrous. Clarifying the source of this discriminatory line with respect to rights has profound implications for who bears the inequality, Gentiles generally or only idolaters. Similarly, there is a significant moral difference between how the discrimination is justified under each of the two possibilities. This is not the place for a comprehensive consideration of the question based on a Talmudic sources, but delineating these two categories of the halacha's attitude toward Gentiles is important for an understanding of the Meiri's position. So that's what we're going to do with Zat Hashem next week, to try to understand the root of this discrimination, which is that based on monotheist way of life versus idolaters, or Gentile versus a Jew? And this is the main question for next week, Bezrat Hashem.
I